In this tutorial, I'll be introducing you to the basics of a p5js sketch. First, a little bit about this tutorial. This is implemented using openprocessing.org. Throughout this tutorial, you'll see text explaining the concepts on the left-hand side, and you'll see the code for those concepts on the right-hand side. You can use the navigation buttons to move forward and backward through the tutorial. And as we go through the tutorial, we'll use the Run button to run the code and see the result. One thing that I find useful is to switch the tutorials to side-by-side layout. This will let us continue to see the code and the running sketch at the same time. So let's get started. p5js uses JavaScript to implement the sketches. The first thing I want to show you is what a comment looks like. Comments are lines in the code that don't actually do anything and are just there to explain the code around them. They come in two forms. The first form is a single line comment. These comments start with 2 forward slashes, and everything from the 2 forward slashes to the end of the line will be ignored. The second kind of comment is a multi-line comment. These comments start with a forward slash and an asterisk, and then they continue across multiple lines until they reach an asterisk followed by a forward slash. The first element of a p5js sketch is the setup function. A function in JavaScript is a group of statements that can be executed together by calling the function by name. To declare a function, we start with a keyword, function, followed by a space and the name of the function. We then have an open and closing parentheses where we could optionally specify an argument list, but in this case, the setup function doesn't take any arguments. That's followed by a code block, which starts with an open curly brace and is followed by any number of statements, and then it is ended with a closing curly brace. The setup function is going to run once when our sketch starts. One common thing to do in your setup function is to create the canvas. This will define the drawing area and specify its size in a width in pixels and a height. So this creates a 400 pixel square canvas. Now, let's fill our canvas with a solid color. The background function is a p5js function that fills the canvas with one color. Here we have to go into a little bit about specifying different colors. In this case, I've used the name of a well-known color, light blue. You can find a list of all the possible named colors on Wikipedia, or use this tool linked to in the tutorial text to find a color that you're looking for based on its hue. There are many other ways to specify colors in p5js. I'll just go over a few of them very briefly. You can specify a color as a single number, which specifies a shade of gray from black, which is 0, up to white, which is 255. So the value 127, because it's halfway between 0 and 255, represents 50% gray. You can also specify colors as red, green, and blue values. They each range from 0 to 255 and indicate how much of that primary color is in the combined together additively to make the resulting color. And then lastly is hex codes, which are commonly used in HTML and CSS. And these encode the same information, red, green, and blue values, but they encode them as hexadecimal, and that takes the form of a string starting with a pound sign. Let's go ahead and run this and see what our sketch looks like. So here we can see we have a solid light blue square, which is our entire canvas. The next component of a p5js sketch is the draw function. The draw function will be run repeatedly. So every time this runs, it'll call the circle function, which is a p5js function that creates a circle on the canvas. It will create it at the current position of the mouse, which is indicated by mouse X, the horizontal position, and mouse Y, the vertical position. And this circle will have a size of 20. In order to see this code run, we need to hit the refresh button. And now we can move our mouse around and see circles being drawn as we're moving our mouse. Because we're still calling the background function only once in the setup function, we see all of the circles that get drawn. If we were to move the background function call from here on line 5 to be inside of the draw function, then we would see only the most recent circle. When you're looking at this tutorial on your own, you are free to edit the code, hit refresh, and see the result. Now we only see the circle at the current mouse position. Now let's cover some of the additional drawing functions available in p5js. The arc function will draw a segment of a circle instead of the entire circle, and this uses the angles in degrees for the start and end of the arc. In order to use degrees, I called the angle mode function with the degrees constant in the setup function, and this switches p5js to using degrees from 0 to 360 as opposed to using radians from 0 to 2 pi. You can look up radians on Wikipedia for more information. The circle function we've already seen. Ellipse is very similar to circle, but allows us to specify different dimensions for width and height. So it'll make sort of a squished circle. The point function draws a single point, and its thickness, the size of that point, is going to be based on stroke weight, which we'll cover a little bit more in the next slide of this tutorial. The line function draws a line starting from a starting position and going to an ending position. A quad draws an arbitrary four-cornered shape by specifying 4 points. Rect draws a regular rectangle based on the position of the top left corner, a width and a height. Square draws a square, so similar to rectangle, but with the same dimensions for the width and height. And triangle draws an arbitrary triangle based on 3 corner points. Let's give this a run and see what it looks like. So here we have our different shapes: arc, circle, ellipse, point, line, quad, rectangle, square, and triangle. In order to change how these shapes are colored, we can use the fill and stroke functions. Both of these functions take a color argument, or arguments. So just like background, they can have a single number for gray or three numbers for red, green, and blue. But here I'm just going to use the named colors because it's easier to read that and to see expect what color is going to appear. And so for each of these colors, I've specified different fills and strokes. Fills will be the solid filled in portion, and the stroke will specify the outline. And I've also increased the stroke weight from its default up to 4. And so that is going to make the outlines look a little thicker. And let's see what that looks like. So there you have it, a very basic p5js sketch with a lot of different drawing functions, different uses of color, and I hope you find this helpful.